Welcome everyone. Um, my name is Anton Bannykh and I work for JetBrains on the Kotlin compiler itself. Unfortunately, Bob couldn't come, so I was asked to substitute, so I will be given my idea of why Kotlin is elegant, and in particular, why it might be a good idea to use it on Android. Right. So, this talk will be mainly targeted for those of you who have heard of Kotlin, but maybe didn't try it yet. So for those of you who have never heard of Kotlin, think of it as of a better Java. So it's like JVM, like Java, with some enhancements. So it's statically typed. It's pragmatic, as in it is developed for like big projects, not for academic purposes. The code should look like small and compact. It's type safe. It offers great interoperability with Java, so you can use it both way, Java from Kotlin and the other way around. And there are a lot of tools around it. So let's consider one small example. So let's say you are developing an Android app and you have some text on the screen that contains an integer value, and you just want to increment it. For those of you who are not familiar with Android, text is represented by a class textView, which has like two methods. It has lots of other methods, but these two in particular, getText and setText. Right. So how would you do it in Java? Well, you write a function. Let's say it takes a view so that you can use it from the onClick from XML. Then you find the thing you want to get, you want to modify. You extract the information you need from it via some calls, like text to string, and then you set the information back. If you use the converter tool from Java to Kotlin, IDEA and Android Studio offers that automatically, then you get the thing you see on the bottom. It looks pretty similar. So we use fun keyword to identify a function. You don't have to worry about all those non-nullable annotations anymore, because in Kotlin we separate nullable, non-null types. The nullable types look the same, it's just they have question mark in the end. Kotlin does a lot of type inference for you, so you don't have to specify types, for example, for local variables. And otherwise, it looks pretty similar, apart from the syntactical difference in how we represent a cast to a type, and also we have this notation of properties. So if you have an API in Java that looks like getters and setters, then Kotlin will allow you to use it as a property. So as if it was a field, and when you read it, the getter is actually invoked, and when you set it, the setter is actually invoked. Right. So how can we make it better? For one thing, like I said, there's a lot of tooling. So there is a plugin that takes care of getting all those text views for you. So it creates a thing that a synthetic accessor, synthetic property that looks like a thing that was defined in the code, but it actually, it is actually defined in the XML. It has the correct type, so you don't have to cast it to text view, and you can just use it. The imports are handled by Android Studio automatically, so let's get rid of that. And we don't need a separate variable, so let's get rid of that as well. Right. So how can we make it even better? Still. So imagine you are using this text field from different locations, like you want to increment, decrement, and maybe use it somewhere else. You don't want to do the conversions all the time. You don't want to extract the text and cast it to string and then parse it all the time. So what you can do is you can create a property that has a getter and a setter, and it works just like that text property did. So when you read it, the getter is invoked, and when you set it, when you write to it, the setter is invoked. And the beauty of it is that you can actually use some complicated expressions like postfix increment, and it will just work. So when you say int view ++, it actually extracts the value as 1 to it, and then uses the set function to set it. Right. So what if you don't want to create a separate property for like every text view? What if you have multiple text views and each of them represents an integer value? Well, you can create an extension property, and that thing allows you to use any text view as if it had an integer field called inText, and you can just modify it. So in this particular example, we define such an extension property once, and then we just use the postfix increment to modify it. Right. So since you only need to write it once and then put it somewhere in your utility class or like in your utility file, you don't need to see it all the time. And if you are using lots of properties like that, you will end up with a function that looks like this. So instead of writing lots of code, you end up with a function that actually, well, is self-explanatory. So you can really see that it does the increment. Right. And for those of you who like love one-liners, you can actually do it like this as well. So it becomes really simple. And notice that you cannot do this in Java. So in Java, you could have a separate functions for getting an integer value and setting an integer value to a property, but there's no way to make the ++ work. Right. So other things that I wanted to cover, and we seem to have some time, are smart casts. For instance, if you wanted to check if an object is of particular type and then use it. If it is, then we can do it like this. You can just write an is check, and then inside of it, you can see that it has a green background. That means that the compiler inserts the casts to the type you need there automatically, and you don't have to do it manually. So in Java, you would have needed to create a separate variable of a particular type so that you can use the API you need. Right. Also, in Kotlin, we have a lot of support for nullable, not null variables. So you could also cover checking in this style, where you either cast the text view to the type you need, or you return a null. So this operator as question mark does exactly that. And then we have some special syntax to chain these expressions together. So this Elvis operator, as we call it, actually looks at the value on the left, and if it's null, then it executes expression on the right. So in this particular case, unless the text view is actually a text view, we'll throw an error. So this part of the presentation will give you a glimpse of other stuff that Kotlin has. In particular, we have a way to declare property, like declare the functionality you want for the property once, and then use it everywhere. So we call this functionality delegates. The most useful ones are like lazy, where you provide a callback which returns you a value sometime when you need it. So you can delay initialization in a type-safe way. Other things include data classes. It's like POJOs with all the stuff you need generated, like hash codes to strings and stuff. We have helper methods to create lists, collections, and other things. Data classes, arrays, collections, you can destruct when you need them. So, for instance, in this case, you don't need to say for every person in people, println person.name and stuff. You can just say that you will need that information destructed in here. And we also have a lot of helpful extensions that are useful when processing collections. It is kind of similar to Java Stream APIs, but it also works on JDK starting from 6, I think. Right. So more advanced stuff includes DSLs. If you are like an Android developer, check out Anchor library. There's a link at the bottom. It allows you to create, to describe hierarchical structures like UIs, HTML, and stuff in the code, and it looks nice and concise without any boilerplate. It is nice. So the bleeding edge, I would consider coroutines. That is a feature that was introduced in Kotlin 101, like roughly a year ago, almost. And it is essentially async promise, like async await on steroids. It is implemented a bit differently so that it allows more flexibility, but it is quite useful. For instance, on Android, you could offload the long-running calculations to other threads quite easily so that your UI is always responsive. And we also have support for multi-platform. So we have compilers from Kotlin to JavaScript, which is released, and from Kotlin to anything LLVM supports, essentially. And we call it native. It is not released yet. It is in technical preview, but they have pretty cool demos. The idea is that you can write code once and then just reuse it on Android, iOS, web, whatever. So here are some useful links. If you're just new to Kotlin, then check out our documentation site. Like, it has lots of examples and reasonings why you might want to try it. There is an online idea thingy, which has lots of examples and counts you could complete, so you don't need to install anything. And then there are some libraries I might have mentioned. So Anchor is great for Android development. Kotlin HTML, it allows you, for instance, create HTML both in JVM and in JavaScript with the same code, so it's like isomorphic. And Kotlin coroutines, which is like a really cool library for asynchronous programming. Thank you.